7 o'clock, I will call the December 16, 2019 school board meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, Mrs. Jagosinski, if you do the roll call. Anita?
Brian Wolpett.
Here.
Gary Dunlap.
Yep.
Cheryl Hancock.
Here.
Tom Cruise.
Excused.
Barb Wetstein.
Here.
Rebecca Reber.
Here.
I am here, and Lizzie Paff.
Here.
Okay, with 6 of the 7 school board members present, I would declare a quorum. Approval of the agenda, I would note that the agenda has been posted, distributed, and sent to local media. With this in mind, are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as published.
So moved.
Anita, is there a second?
Second.
Rebecca, any discussion? Okay, motion has been made and seconded to approve the agenda as published. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Public participation. It looks like I have one card this evening for public participation. Greg Gurkowski, and wishes to speak to recognition and thank you. So if you want to come over to the table?
Which one does it matter?
Yeah, wherever,
Wherever?
wherever you're comfortable.
Should I state my name, or you already did that?
Sure, well, you can.
Greg Grokowski, 434 Russell Drive South. I apologize for my voice tonight. I've had a nasty cold. I'd totally lost it Friday, so I'm just glad to be here today. Right, Lizzie?
Yeah.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank my wife, Carrie Grokowski, for 22 years of teaching service in the Holmen School District. She was hired by a wonderful, compassionate man named Bernie Ferry back in 1998. For 12 years, she taught language arts and speech. We sometimes want to measure effectiveness and success in the classroom by test scores, assignments, assessments, and events that happen on a daily basis. But I've come to realize that success can be measured very differently. I cannot tell you how many times Carrie and I have been out and about in public, and we hear from those students. They come up and talk to her. I hear these conversations. She gets texts, emails, messages telling her how her helpfulness, her effort in the classroom has helped them be successful wherever it is in life, or just how good a person she was. It never stops. Carrie was an outstanding language arts teacher. But after that, she accepted a position at the Academy on the Prairie 8 years ago. She thrived in that position. She developed it. She made it her own. She always saw the potential all the students had in her program. Didn't matter what student was placed with her. They got every bit of her attention, compassion, and love. Every bit of it. And her relationships, like the ones in language arts, those relationships were meaningful and heartfelt. Even for the tough ones. I could make a list a mile long of things that she does for her students. She's up on Sunday nights baking them birthday cakes. Doesn't matter what night it is. That's the most recent one I remember. She hosts a Thanksgiving meal that her family has donated every year the last 8 years. Her sister just recently made a phone call what Christmas presents would Carrie students like. I mean, that list never ends. Her current project is making blankets for the Ronald McDonald House, just a cause that's very near and dear to our hearts. In fact, I was walking out the door tonight. She was walking in. She has driven students to TC to take their GED in the middle of summer. I can't, this list will never stop. She loves these students, and I mean that. I truly mean that. In fact, it was that love that almost kept her here when that decision was being made. But Friday's her last day, this Friday, which is not how I thought it would end. You had the right person in that job. She was built for it. So I want to thank my wife and a really great educator, Kara Grokowski, for 22 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I know I've got some comments prepared for later, and Dr. Mueller does too, but appreciate your coming in and sharing that information and sharing the pride you have in Carrie, which you should, because we all do, so thank you. I think that is all that I have under public participation, so moving into District Administrator's report.
Yeah, we want to congratulate our cast and crew of the Fall Holmen High School play, Almost Maine, as well as our director, Cam Lynn. She's done a great job with the students again this year. They received the All-State Award for their production. And then Zach Shams, very talented young man, was awarded an Outstanding Acting Award for his role as Pete. So I just wanted to congratulate them and thank them for their work again. So talent in not only our academics, but then also in the arts, as you can see with that. And also just wanted to mention that you'll see a lot of drill action reports, and it's that time of year. With Act 143, we're required by the end of the year to have completed an active shooter drill in all of our schools. So those were scheduled in advance, and they all mostly the time fall this time of year, and that so you'll see the majority of them listed. Sand Lake is on there. They actually are rescheduling it, so they're still going to complete it before the end of the year, but that will come again on the board agenda in January. So just wanted you to know that.
All right.
All right, recognitions and thank yous.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, should I
Next
just
item
go
is
into that?
recognition and thank you, the Lacrosse Community Foundation Grant.
Yeah, so I wanted to start though, just, there was a phenomenal fundraiser that many of you saw maybe on the news, in that we had some of our actual past high school graduates in Holmen, and a local band called Last Call wanted to put on a fundraiser for our music program, and with the help of some of our parents, ended up doing an outstanding fundraiser, raising over $6,000 for our music program at the high school. So we just thank them for all their efforts in doing that. And then with the Lacrosse Community Foundation grant, Melissa Wilbur at Prairie View, she got $500 for her movement and mindfulness that she's going to be doing. Some yoga with the kids. And then Todd and Linda Troutman, also $1,000 to support our band program, which is a very generous donation from them. They're very great supporters of our music, so thank you. And one last thing, Abbey Lynn Trucking. So they actually gave us, wrote a grant, and we're in the process of getting $50,000 towards our propane-fueled buses.
We took it in last week.
Yep, so we just received that. So that helps us with our replacement of our bus fleet, which is wonderful. That's a great addition to that fleet. So then that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then moving on to reports and discussion, Viking Elementary two-stage entry.
All right. Here, I'll just. Okay. I guess we'll just go like this. So, this brings us back. This might be a familiar slide for some. Well, we should introduce ourselves first, sorry.
Doug Ramsey, architect from HSR here in La Crosse.
He's been with us quite often lately, so I shouldn't assume anything though, and he's
Yep.
back to help us present on this.
I'm Bonnie Striegel, principal at Viking.
Yeah, so we were all very involved with the Viking two-stage. John's in here too, he's always very involved in all these projects, and Greg too, thank you for their support in all this. But this slide should look familiar. This is we're coming to this. So this goes back to our referendum, our safety and security referendum from April of 2017. We're coming upon our final project for that referendum and that question. So this was, to do all of our cameras, surveillance, door locking systems, and then our two-stage entry. So we're on our final two-stage entry, Viking Elementary. So that's just a recap of that. Just a reminder, we had criteria that we followed in doing our development of our plan, and just create secure entrances, no loss of instructional space. I'm trying not to separate our office staff, keeping them with each other. No need for additional staffing, and to not decrease the current office space that was there. So that was some of our criteria that we used in all of the two-stage entry development, and did also with Viking. And we also, like we did in the other processes, our principals were allowed, if they needed to do visits, having conversations with other principals in the area, or even with Doug and those other school districts he recommends, looking at their designs and getting input, and then coming up with our design. And then here's our timeline. We are actually, green is completed. Back we did our schematic design, addition and remodel. We actually are coming in the yellow. They're coming upon completion of our development of construction documents, the specifications and so forth, with the hope to go to bid here coming up January 7th.
Yep, that's,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I can take it over.
And
from
now
here.
you can take it from here. Yep.
So January 7th is when we're going to release the bidding documents to interested contractors. We're looking to get state approval from the state DSPS on January 15th. One thing that isn't on here, but January 28th, we do have a SPAR review with the Village of Holmen, because anything you add to the outside of a building has to be reviewed by them. So don't see any concerns, because we're basically matching the materials and things, but it's kind of a formality. February 10th, we'll be coming back here to hopefully approve some bids, and then hoping to start construction on the addition part May 4th, and then we would like to start on the remodeling portion of the work right after school's out on June 8th. And then having everything completed by the start of school around the first part of September. We have a pretty detailed budget here. I'm not going to go through each line item, but with some of the bids that we've been receiving over the past few years on not only the high school project, but our other secure entry projects, we're hopeful that we can continue with that interest in the bidding from different contractors, so they can sharpen their pencils and be awarded the project. But we are, total project costs were just under 1.3 million at 1.287, but that does include pretty much everything. So we are looking for a construction bid of about 1.1 million. So hopefully those will come in on budget.
And just as a reminder, we've been talking about the budget pretty consistently for quite a while, and we have been putting our money in the reserve so that we can pay for this dollar amount.
So getting and looking at the design, this is a view of the, kind of an aerial view of the existing Viking Elementary front entranceway. And this is a new aerial. So this is basically, this area that I'm circling here is an addition. And this is kind of a similar type of entry canopy with some signage, just kind of like what we did at Evergreen. But this one obviously will say Viking. So this is a shot of if you're walking up to the doors at Viking, what it kind of looks like right now, and this is what it will look like next September. So once again, this is kind of the canopy, and this is the addition out here, a lot of glass, so we can see who's coming and going. From a floor plan perspective, this is an existing plan. So on the right-hand side, we have an existing classroom. And then the office, once again, like some of the other buildings, is tucked back inside the building. It's kind of flanked on either side by existing toilet rooms. So our new plan is basically flip-flopping the office and the classroom. So we're putting a classroom in the back. We're gonna have some natural light over this area, so we're gonna put some glass up high so we can hopefully steal some natural light from the existing entrance vestibule, and it will spill into the classroom. We're creating a kind of contained area for the milk area, but this will be on the right-hand side, the main entrance into the classroom. We have a flexible learning space that's kind of right on the kind of front doors of the existing area. So anytime that you're coming for an event at Viking and you wouldn't be coming through the secure entry, you'll see this flexible learning space, whether or not there's things that are displayed there or there's some activities going on there during the day. But for our secure entry, we have a vestibule on this corner down here, so you'll enter the building here, come through here. We've got a 3-station reception counter that has lots of work area as well, a copy machine. This is all open space. And then you can get to the existing school hallway through this door the door's here, sorry, with a waiting area. And then back here, there's a mail copy space for staff, so they can come in, get their mail. They don't need to bother the receptionist or anybody else. They can just do that quickly. And then getting back to the office area. So you can see this line right here. That's the existing exterior wall that we're adding to. So along the exterior, we've got 3 offices, one being Bonnie's office, principal's office, a corridor, and then we've got a nice conference room on the right-hand side. This internal area here is a nurse's area with a toilet shower. And then we've got a toilet for the office staff and any visitors right here. And we're also gonna be looking at redoing some of the coat areas to the left-hand side of the main entrance, as well as creating a coat area that's kind of off the main corridor here that will kind of add to and replace some of the coat areas that we're taking over with some of these areas, which is kind of a dual action storage area so it's got a door from the outside to get at play equipment, but it also can be loaded and things can be stored from the internal corridor as well. This is kind of, it's an isometric, but it's an aerial view, like if you sliced off the roof and second floor and took it off, you can kind of see that what I was talking about. This is the reception area, kind of the waiting area, the 3 offices, conference room, nurses area. And then this is a flexible learning area with the classroom behind it with windows up above. So this is a view, if I just walk through the secure entrance vestibule, I'll be greeted by a receptionist and secretary here. We'll have some signage on the wall to identify it as Viking Elementary. This is what, if I was working behind the counter, this is what I can expect to see as people walking up and the visibility to the outside. This is if I'm working at the check-in counter again, but I'm looking off to my right, so I get a view of the hallway in the existing corridor of the building. And this is if I'm in the existing hallway looking back into the new office area. This is what I'll see. This is this area over here. These are the existing doors right now. And then this is what that area we're calling that flexible learning space with the glass up above so we can get natural light into the classroom. And then this is a view from the classroom looking back to that flexible learning space. Similar type things that we did at Viking, at Evergreen for some of those internal classrooms. Not sure if you've had a chance to tour any of those new classrooms, but I think they turned out pretty well. And that's what we have.
So any questions or any more detail needed on, just to share the flexible learning space, those spaces are very valuable. And then the office areas, the flexible learning, in doing instruction for the wide range of students now, I don't know if you noticed on the side wall, there was little circles. Kids can sit in those and independently read. See on the left side, those little circles in the wall? You know, just some of the new type of learning environments that we are
Not
seeing.
the ones up high.
Yeah, we aren't gonna put them up
Down
high. Yeah, they're gonna climb it now. And also, just office space for when we have, some of our counseling coming in and working with kids. We have been needing more office space for privacy and so on, so that's what some of that is for. Is there anything else, Bonnie, you wanted to add with the
Just
design?
small group instruction, and that's what we would use that flexible learning space for. And like you said, we have counselors coming into our building all the time, so those offices will be used quite often.
Yeah. Yeah, Viking's just a little different. It's our largest capacity elementary, and it also is the only elementary that also has a 4K program that we're doing a two-stage entry on as to some of the reasoning. So one of the benefits of this is our 4K administrative assistant in our Sue Eitland, our associate principal, she'll be downstairs, because right now, there's so much running up and down with parents and coming back and forth, where now they'll be able to greet them right there at the door and then, go with them and show them where they're going and so forth. So it'll be a lot less interruptions in the main office area for the Viking assistant, so. Yeah.
So any questions? So you're confident that the budget, depending on what the construction bids come in as, will be able to be within budget?
Confident as always. I've been getting some grief lately that my estimates are too much, so we have extra money left over, so I think hopefully that's not set a precedent. I mean, I think this project will be a little different just because some of the addition complexities, and we're having to do some fire ratings and other things.
Well, I think the budget was originally much less for this one too, and so we
Yes.
had to,
No,
For Viking, oh, it was 1 point, well. The
original.
construction cost
The
is
very
pretty similar,
original
but,
ones.
yeah, original.
yeah.
Like
I
back
was-
about a year ago, yes.
Yeah,
Initially,
before, I think it was before we did any design stuff, so.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Doug.
Yep.
And this is just a report, so it's not on the agenda. Then the next thing is the fire alarm system. John and Julie and Dr. Mueller will discuss that, and it is on tonight's consent agenda.
Stay there if you
Just add it now.
want. Jime's gonna join me.
Okay.
If we have more fiscal questions, Julie's there to help. She doesn't need to go sit over here. Yeah, this is on for consent also tonight, so I tried to give you some information ahead of time to look at, and also be sure any questions you may have or any discussion we need to have about this. Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna go to the.
Okay.
I'm just gonna go. Next slide. So what is actually this all about? Well, as you know, we have an addition going on our current high school. And in that new addition, we have a fire alarm system we must put within that. And then what we have found or come upon is in having the new fire alarm system put in the new addition, then the current fire alarm system in the current high school just doesn't quite work as well. What was the year that was put in, John?
93, it originally was
Yeah.
put in 93. This is something that really needs to be replaced anyway, and when we had the bids come in, and we had such a contingency, we thought, well, let's come up with see what we can do to maybe upgrade the existing and not just do the new building.
Right. So, with that, so this is one of those items that came up and we're like, ooh, this might be something, especially with the safety, that'd be important to take a look at.
So the current system is a zone system, and what that means is that we have maybe several devices, up to 6 to 8 devices, pull stations, smoke alarms on a zone. So if a smoke alarm goes off, zone 25, say, is an alarm, It could be one of several devices, and you gotta go out and look for it. The newer systems in all of our other buildings have devices which are addressable, which means when that device goes in alarm, you know exactly which device goes into alarm. Much safer, much easier to use. The original system that's in there has a Y2K problem, I guess I would say. We still have to, if I have to reprogram and put a calendar in so the days and dates match, I have to look up a 1900-something calendar that'll match whatever year, 2018, 2019, and put that year in 19
He's
whatever.
tricking the system is what he's doing.
Yeah, yeah, so it's very, very outdated. The other thing we found was that, or what we've heard from our people who were designing and putting this in, is that once we submit this, if we submit it to the state just to do the new part, the state will more than likely reject that and say we have to do the whole building. We could ask for a variance, we could ask for a hardship and ask to put that off, but we thought if we can do it, we would like to do that now. So,
Well, and did you talk,
Oh,
the
please.
alignment of the systems then? So that you don't have two different vendors that you're working with and dealing with? That
so
was a
if
big
we
one
have a
too.
problem with a new system or anything in there, then, you know, who do we call? Who's responsible? Is it the Simplex or is it the Edwards?
Yeah, and so that's another reason, because you might be thinking, well, why don't you just wait and see where we're at and do it later? But then you're going through that phase of time where you're dealing with a lot of inconsistencies within the system and that. Okay,
Okay,
all right, John, I'll let you, we'll go on now.
that's fine.
So, go
So,
ahead.
so now we asked Stanek, who is the electrician, to come up with a price for us to go ahead and upgrade the rest of the 225,000 square feet of building beyond the 75,000 new. And that figure came in at about almost $203,000.
Yep,
Which was higher than what we thought it was gonna be, but as I did some research, I found out that new systems basically cost between $1 or $2 a square foot. And a lot of time, and then what I found too was when you retro, like we're doing now, it's usually jumps up to at least $3 a foot. Their price is actually about $1.25,
Quarter.
something like that, a square foot.
yeah.
And as they are the electrician on site, typically what we would do with something like this would be to bid it out. But if we bid it out, now we've got to pay somebody to design the system. We'll have to go to the state again for approval. There's a lot of costs that will be incurred. We'll have to have somebody help us bid this out. Like I said, it's too complex for me to be able to do myself. So we'd have to hire an HSR or some kind of an engineer to do that. And right now, they've actually got everything all designed and ready to go if we so choose to do that. So we're going to ask that the school board make an exception with their Administrative Rule 6722 on the bidding and purchase requirements and contract with Stanek Electric for the purchase and installation of the new fire alarm system in the original part of the building.
Yeah, and one other thing we had conversation about was, so a lot of times when you're doing a construction project like this, I'm learning a lot, and I think about I'll never want to build my own home. But, you know, within the conversation, you know, they have the current fire alarm system, and they're like, well, do you want to add on to that system in the current part as part of this project? And that's a lot of times conversations you can have as to what, you have contingency dollars and what do you want to do and do with that. Well, if we were just to do that with our contractor, Fowler and Hammer, with them having to add to their bond, it would be a 10% markup also as to the reason where we would like to pull this out, do it as a separate contract with Stanek, and then we also save money in that, on that end too. So this is a really, in my mind, special circumstance and opportune time, just being that we're in the middle of this large project, and all I'm thinking of is, safety, and we're putting in this new fire system, and if we don't continue and upgrade the whole old part of the system, how are they going to be compatible? How are they going to work? Do we take that chance? And so I just feel like with them on site and already having everything ready, which is, we would like to proceed if at all possible. So that's what we are asking for consent on this evening. So questions?
Are there any questions?
I have one.
Yes.
So I saw like the two funds listed there, so my assumption is that those monies are available.
So Fund 42 is actually, and Julie, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Fund 42 is our,
Construction.
the construction budget, but that's for so with contingency. So if we do have contingency dollars, we would use those first.
Okay.
Definitely. But then we also have Fund 10, and John does have, I'll let you speak to that. I don't want to get in any trouble.
Oh, just that you were planning for a smaller cost project within the long-term
Yes,
capital
yeah.
improvements, so it would come as
I
part
put
of
in,
it.
I put in some dollars this
Yep.
year
Yep,
into the regular budget in case we ran into something related to the construction with this type of thing, or HVAC or something else, so in case we needed more dollars for that.
so both funds are listed as a combination opportunity to source this expenditure. Yep.
Any other questions?
Just a comment, just thank you for being proactive, because it sounds very logical and cost savings, I think, in the long
Yeah,
run.
I wish we were more proactive
You know?
and really included it under the original
Well.
budget, but,
You can't know what you don't know, right?
yeah.
I
yeah.
say, if I would have known about
Yeah.
fire alarm system, but
And it is, so a fire alarm system sounds like it's an easy thing, but moving into our new building, we have a fire alarm system, and oh my gosh, the things that have to happen, and then we were working with someone, and they are out of the cities, and so any kind of travel is very complicated. We finally found a local person that we can work with, but the inspections and all those things that have to be done. So I can't imagine working with two different vendors for one facility.
Right,
That would be
right.
like a nightmare. And then a sprinkler system.
Well,
Yeah, that even is even more, so sorry to change the topic, but yeah, so this is on this evening's consent agenda, and so it can be pulled separately if you'd like, or it can be kept within that, so, okay, thank you.
thank you
you.
for your time.
And then the 2021 preliminary budget.
Just a correction, budget variables for the forecasting model, not budget.
Oh, but yes,
That's okay.
I didn't finish reading the sentence.
That's
sorry.
okay. So this time of year, our budget development calendar calls for bringing forward to the school board and sharing with leadership team the variables to be used in the annual process of a 5-year forecasting model for budget expenditures and revenues. We primarily focus on the general Fund 10 operating budget, but I'll touch just quickly on Fund 27, special education, and Fund 50. So I'm just going to go down. This is the summary format. Tonight, I'll present these variables. We do contract with Forecast 5 Analytics for their financial forecasting software, and so these variables are like the most impactful variables that will be used within the model. There's obviously other variables that impact the budget, and often there's one-time events that also impact the budget, but these are kind of the heavy hitters. Contracted wages and benefits are a good majority of the general fund budget, so we start with those. In the past, actually last year, we had a larger percentage being used for the salary assumptions, and often it's the assumption that whatever's used in the forecast is what is approved by the school board when it comes time for base wage contract agreements in the next spring. The contracted, as you know, when we bring base wage in the spring, it's based on the July 1st, in this case, for next year, July 1st, 2020, CPIU, Consumer Price Index Urban Rate. That is currently trending at 1.76% through the November forecast, and we only have one more month to go. And so the variance between the November forecast and what's announced in January is 0.00%. So there's not going to be much movement between, at least the last 5 and 10 year history predicts there's not going to be much movement in that percentage by the January announcement. So I'm proposing that we are conservative and we use what we think is going to be the CPIU for July 1st of 2020, and then using that in the forecast, also providing you the comfort that we're not committing to like a 2.5 when it comes in lower. I think this is a more conservative estimate. The history, 5-year history, is like 1.54, and the 10-year history average is like 1.57. So I'm using 1.55 for the remaining years of the 5-year forecast. So that's the first line item. That was a little long, but this is lower than what we were using last year. And I think it's a better predictor based on the historical consumer price index or urban numbers. The next line is
Can I just ask about that, though?
You bet.
Because I believe that we were looking at those higher numbers on purpose. I mean, I think that as a board, we had talked about that we didn't necessarily just want to rely on the CPIU.
So the CPIU is what the board's required to when we're doing base wage contracts with the union, and the teachers' union is the only union we have remaining in Holmen. As you know, we extend the same process and typically same percentage to the other employment groups as well. Not always straight across, but we've done some various specific wage increases based on comparisons. For example, head custodian at the high school, which is used much more often than the other buildings, had a wage differential added. And we have used the difference between the CPIU and what we used for budget input variable. That's what you're referring to.
Well, I think it is, and this, if we just do this, that isn't going to
This doesn't mean you couldn't make that decision in the spring.
right. So, but I do think for planning purposes, we were trying to use that higher number, so we had that flexibility. Because there's a difference between being required and what we want to do. And I think as a board, we have
Right.
had, so I guess we'll just, it's not on tonight's agenda, but I'd like to see what it was last year, what was presented last year.
2.8 and 2.5.
Yeah, see, so
Which
that's
is quite a bit
big-
above.
Yeah.
Okay. Just keep in mind, too, students drive revenue. And we want to be cautious of the fact that we did go down in enrollment this year. And putting this into the forecast is just a variable in a model. So if it comes in at 1.77, that's what we would be required to do. And then the board could make a determination if they wanted to do something above that.
But I think it's much more difficult to do that than if we go in at a 2.8 or whatever, and then say, you
Yeah.
know, or if we go in at a 1.7 and say, oh, we want to increase it a whole point, to have that flexibility. So I guess I think there needs to be more discussion on this.
Yeah. We also have a special circumstance this year, too,
But
that
I'll
Julie's
get
going
to
to talk
that
about
next.
down below with the percentage additional to the 1.77 for one of our groups.
I can see it
Am
both, I can
mean,
see
I
it
s-
both ways.
I see a couple people, yeah.
Yep, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, and what we can do is we can run some models and then we can see if we have enough money or not. Because if we don't, then we'd have to cut somewhere else if that's a priority.
Well, and I
You know,
think that
and
is, that's also part of it, is this is just the beginning of the budget cycle and
Right.
process. And
Yep.
if we don't have that money, and then we all of a sudden want to put it in salaries, then we have to cut someplace. And I think the idea was, let's hold it for that purpose in the front end, and then if we don't use it all, it can go and help out other areas, but if, do you,
I understand.
Yeah.
I guess I was under the impression that what was in there is what the board felt they had to do or had to commit to, rather than having the option to add above the CPIU.
No, the object behind putting the assumptions up is to try to make a realistic guess, scientific guess at what that number is going to be for the budget. Not what's expected, but realistic, you take a good look at it and say, okay, realistically, what is that number going to be? And I think you're right. I think the number would probably end up being around like at least 2 or 2.4 or something like that. Because we've never had, that I can remember for a while, we've never had it settled at 1.55. And all the numbers, they're supposed to be forecasts of reality of what we think the best thing is, what we're going to end up at. You take the information, you take the cost of living and all that into account, but then you have to take in the last 5 years' history too, and kind of guess it. That's the whole idea, is put some assumptions there that are realistic, so that when you make those assumptions, you can say, okay, this is what's going to cost us, and get as close as you can.
And didn't we, quite a few years ago, I think it was when Tim was still on the board, we did this, and we were told ahead of time, well, we're putting the lower numbers in there because that's what you have to provide. And then I remember it coming back to us, and we said, well, we want to increase this, and there was a lot of turmoil on the board talking about, well, we didn't plan for that because we didn't put the number in at this point,
yeah.
is
I-
what Cheryl's saying.
And that's probably why, so I think that might be something we want to take up in
Yeah, and the other.
another time.
Yeah, because there's another part of this discussion that I want us to have a conversation about too, because we're seeing students with greater needs and needing more staffing in areas. So if we need those folks, because we're seeing more kids that have these needs, are we gonna be able to afford to pay them all? But we want to too, so, yeah.
I
Just
can remember having those
cognizant
discussions,
of it,
like another
but,
topic could
yeah.
say, everybody says it's going to be 3.5, but from what we can see and what we're hearing from the state, it's going to be closer to 4.0 or whatever it is, 4.2, whatever that number is. So if that's close to real, let's put that number in, not what they're telling us it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was it, because because by the time we got to that discussion, then it was like, well, where are you gonna cut from?
Right.
In order to make that a higher number. Whereas if we decide to lower that, we would have it would be much better, more pleasant to be able to take those funds and distribute them in areas of unmet needs versus pulling them out of a project that's been funded but now can't be funded, so.
It's a slippery slope because you don't want to pad it artificially either.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
want to be as realistic as you can, so it's a slippery slope.
So it would be good, I think, because I think I even, as we discussed it sort of last year, I remember we looked at it and the number was lower than what it had been the year before, and we kind of wanted to, there was some interest in keeping that. So I think maybe that would be a good start for us to see, and we may need to have a conversation about that before we approve it, but
I do know that it's been your goal to make sure that we don't have a lot of fluctuation for our staff. So even when the CPIU was 0.12 3 years ago, I think, we still agreed to 1.5, and then again, a 1.5, and then last year, CPIU was 2.44, and our budget input variable was 2.51, and that's what we used in the spring, so.
because we were able to make some of those adjustments in areas that were under. So I think we don't want to take that away either, that flexibility that if you get to this and then we find we have a group of people that comparatively do we have to give our staff then less than 1.7? So,
Yep. I just want to be cautious about
Yeah.
the revenue source as well and the unpredictable enrollment right now. It's challenging, so.
Good
So what's
conversation.
presented is the CPIU or most likely CPIU for July 1. The next line, are we good?
Yep.
Go on? Okay. The next line is a line for substitute rates. This is not teacher or EA substitutes. Those are contracted and they're down further down the line. But substitutes for our custodians, cooks, and admin assistants that are employees of ours. And in February of 2018, we made an adjustment across the board for all of our substitutes rates. It's not something we do every year. And so within the model, we're projecting like every other year that we will be possibly looking at that based on the competitive rates in the area and whether or not we're challenged to fill those roles. So that's more specific to custodians, cooks, and admin assistants. And then the next line is the one that Dr. Mueller was referring to, a one-time adjustment. So as you're aware, we've been in discussion with the Holmen Education Association around a compression of the current matrix, salary matrix. That discussion started last spring and was presented to the teachers in May and again recently by our Supervisor of Human Resources through email communication. We predict that lane compression will cost approximately $55,000 as people are earning more credits to move from left to right on the matrix in a compressed schedule, or 0.33%. So because this is out of the ordinary, it's unusual, it's not the regular annual movement on the existing schedule, we've pulled that out as a one-time adjustment. So if you were to add those two together, for example, for the teachers group, you'd get closer to percentage-wise what was added last year to the schedule. Next is the Social Security and Medicare. That rate hasn't changed in years, so we continue to use 7.65% across the model years. And the next one is WRS. WRS, Wisconsin Retirement System, changes in January. So it's really actually an average of 2 years percentage. It will go up to 6.75 January of 2020. And so I'm keeping that in the model through the remainder because I don't know how it's going to change. That has to do with the number of annuitants and how the market's doing for the pool of retired resources. And just thought using the same one across the board would be better than decreasing it so that we can account for the employer portion of that benefit. The next is the health and dental for the employer benefit using 3.5% for health. This is the same as we had in the variables last year with an increase of 0.5% per year for each year in the model. This is challenging to predict. It is much better come April when we're closer to our renewal and we can see utilization for many, many months. December's too early. So short of using industry trend, we're not sure where that will end up. We continue to look at our health insurance plan and work with our agent to try to make improvements both in the plan and the wellness initiatives in the district. And a 2% increase per year variable for dental insurance. Next is the assumptions, a non-salary and benefit for the general fund. We start with the purchased services, which are the 300s. This is where the contracted teacher and education assistant contract comes into play. We contract through a vendor called Teachers on Call for those positions, and within the model using the same CPIU estimate across the board as we did with the wage increase estimate. Even if we do not increase our rate of pay for substitute teachers or EAs, the vendor themselves might have an increased contract cost to cover their overhead and expenses and benefits. The next line on item listed as Object 320, Purchase Services Property. You'll see going all the way across to fiscal year 24, school year 23-24. This is that reserved McHugh-Briggs safety security referendum dollars that are sitting in reserve. We don't really know when those are going to come into play in our expenditure budget, but we don't want to lose sight of them because they are in reserve, and when the village and the county and everyone is ready to move forward on that project, that's when those dollars would be expended. The next line item, you see 1.2 million. That's the estimated cost of the Viking Elementary two-stage entry for the 2021 fiscal year. There will be some expenditures, as noted earlier, in May and June of this year. So we'll have to just figure that out over the course of between June and July, 2 different fiscal years, how much falls into each side of that. But we're reserving 1.2 million for expenditures in 2021 to complete that final two-stage entry project. The open enrollment transfer is a growing expense within statute. There is an increased dollar amount for regular and special education open enrollment transfer. And so that is predicted in the model at 4.6% and 4.8%. And then line item 400, non-capital referendum. Next year is the first year the high school operating referendum recurring will come into play for the new addition. There's a portion of that is reserved in a sinking fund for future years down the line when we need a new roof on that segment of the building or boiler replacement, things like that. The total operational annual money in that referendum is $460,000. 322 would be the annual recurring added to the budget to be used to operate. The next item is just a small decrease every year. When we increase utilities, down below that, there's an adjustment expected in the capital objects budget until we provide a greater allocation to the buildings and grounds, annual allocation. And then we're going to go down to utilities. These are very similar to prior years, 0.5% in electricity for heat and electricity for other than heat, 2% for both water and sewer. And then moving down to insurances, 2% for property and liability insurance potential increases, and then 3% for workers' compensation premiums. So Holmen has had some ups and downs in workers' comp. We pay above the state average in premium based on our accidents. And so until we can get that below a 1, so if you know anything about workers' comp, you want to be 1 or lower on the modification. 1 is the average, and we, I think, are trending at about 1.12, which means we pay more than anyone who's under a 1. And so we have seen, when I came 5 years ago, we were at 1.18. So we have seen a little bit of decline, and are working hard to bring more awareness and training on safety in the workplace. And sometimes you just can't help it, especially in icy, snowy winters and slips, trips, and falls, things like that. So continuing to project 3% per year increase in the workers' comp premium. As far as Fund 27, special education goes, we use similar increases to Fund 10 for the same object codes, so I did not repeat those for purchase services, non-capital objects, capital objects. Same as for Fund 50, we use the same salary and benefit estimates. Michael Gaspar, our school nutrition supervisor, does his own budget in Fund 50. As far as salary and benefits, we have to share the base wage assignment and contract information, but then for purchase services through other expenditures, 300 through 900 object codes, he pretty much manages that budget and submits what he thinks he needs to me. So for the forecast model, we use the same percentages. The manual adjustments, this is the non-recurring renewed tech referendum. So the first year is the current year, fiscal year 20, and then for the next 4 years. So that was a reduction from $655 per year for for 4 years to $450,000 for 5 years. So that will end unless renewed in the last column on the model in fiscal year '25. Next, we'll move on to revenue input variables. Continuing to use 6% equalized valuation per year in the model. This is what we used last year. We'll keep an eye on this. We get numbers in May and October. This October, 2 months ago, was actually 8%. That's pretty aggressive and above the area a little bit, so I don't want to use something that's too high because that impacts our calculations for property tax distribution and school tax rate. And so using 6% until, we see change in the trend, I think is a reasonable number. The per pupil revenue limit increases are tied to 3-year average membership. As you know, this for 1920, the legislature did increase the revenue limit slightly. It's been a long time since that happened, and so I'm not predicting it's going to happen again right away. I could be wrong. And then also the per pupil categorical aid amount also went up this year, and so conservatively estimating that it will not increase again. It's currently at $724 per pupil. Next is the investment income. In the last couple of years, we had safety and security referendum revenue in the bank account, and we're earning nice interest on that until all those projects were completed. It also was helping with our cash flow. Now that we are getting closer to the end of those projects, there isn't as much available to earn interest not being used on a weekly basis, and so project that the interest income will reduce. Currently, we're getting a little more than the 1.5% on the cash balances in the general fund. No change to educator effectiveness or, and then federal and state grants are monitored annually for revenue changes based on those awards. As far as levy assumptions, the 460,000, that might be in the wrong cell. My apologies. I'll take a look at that. So that is the high school addition, recurring operational revenue. And then the next line is the tech. So we're on the revenue side now, so it sounds the same, but it's the incoming revenue from the levy. We do not have a Fund 41. And then Fund 80, this is a placeholder. As you know, Dr. Mueller and myself have talked about the Community Education Fund. We currently have a contracted liaison supporting some work for the potential offerings at the Holmen Boys and Girls Club. So we've talked about what would that impact be if we were to levy to support community education expenditures. I think it's something that should be included, so at least we are thinking around that going forward. And then at the bottom is the estimates for special education. This is reimbursement. This is state reimbursement on special education. It's predicted to just go down slightly each year in the model. The appropriation for special education is never quite enough, certainly not enough. And even when there's promises, we don't see as much as we hope for because the expenses keep going up. And so as districts submit more and more eligible reimbursable expenses, there's less money to go around and things are prorated heavily. So I think that is the end of the input variables. Is there any questions?
Any questions? Okay, and I think that comes up on our next agenda item, the next
Thank you.
meeting. Yes,
thank
so, okay. Consent agenda items, we have 9 items this evening to consider. Are there any that you would like to have pulled separately, to be considered separately, or I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented?
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
I'll let Stacy figure that one out. So motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda items as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And Dr. Mueller, did you?
Yeah, just wanted to say a couple of comments. So, Greg, thanks for coming and speaking in that. I missed the last meeting. Thank you for letting me be excused for that. And when it was on the personnel report where Carrie she's moving on to another role, which she'll have a great impact on students, but just in an older capacity, which is wonderful in that. But just, I've been in the district, for some time, a little while now in that, and just the impact our educators have on our students. And Carrie is one of the fine examples of that. Really, like Greg said, finding the potential in our students and listening and working with them. And the big piece is the relationship piece and being able to build those relationships with kids so that they trust you, so that you can reach out to those students. And we see that in so many pockets and places in the district in that. So just wanted to thank her personally for all of her time here. And in the time that I've been here, just seeing that in action, it's been wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then moving on to board members' reports and discussion. I'll call on board members if you have any committee comments or general comments you'd like to make, please feel free to do so. So I will start with Brian Wopat.
I'd like to wish the staff and students a wonderful, safe, and relaxing break.
Okay, thank you. Gary Dunlap?
I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. And I'd like Greg to tell his wife, for me anyway, thanks so much for what she's done down there and how she handled those kids. And it didn't go unnoticed. We all noticed how it blossomed down there while she was down there. Things got better and better, and it was just a joy dealing with those kids. And I run into them at the Y and stuff, and they're all just dynamite kids. You can tell they really had some influence from somebody. And just tell her we really appreciate it. I personally appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. Barb Wettstein?
Yeah, I agree. When I saw that in the personnel report, I had reached out to Mr. Sackett and said, you have a really big hole to fill, which I'm sure he was highly aware already. Yeah, so just thank you to her for all she's done.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca?
Just happy holidays to everybody on the board and the school district and all the students as well. So everybody have a great time off.
Okay, thank you. Anita Jagosinski?
Just happy holidays, like Rebecca said, and also I wanted to echo the comments about Carrie. My kids had her when she was still in language arts and speech in high school. But I've been contacted by some of the parents whose kids she's changed over the years down on the prairie, and like Gary said, hasn't gone unnoticed, so thank her, Greg. Thanks for speaking tonight, too.
And Lizzie?
Yeah, I just have a quick review of things going on at the high school. Something that's pretty deeply impacted me over the past couple of weeks. Kids at the high school have been performing the SEEDS performance to all the grade levels. I'm not sure if they've gone through all of the grade levels yet, but I know that they've performed for the high school. And if you guys don't know, SEEDS is a program where they focus on anti-bullying and mental health and stuff like that. And so that was very moving just to see my classmates on stage performing so openly about issues that high schoolers and everyone is dealing with mental health problems and things like that. So that was quite inspiring. And also, almost every Monday we have a PBIS lesson focusing on how we can improve our mental health and just the school setting and make it more positive. And those have been amazing as well, just having an open conversation with peers and with teachers, focusing on how we can better our relationships. So I just wanted to thank all of the school counselors and teachers for working so hard to make mental health, it doesn't have that stigma anymore, and we can just talk about it openly and honestly. So I just wanted to thank all of the teachers for their hard work.
Thank you. And I also want to do happy holidays to everyone out there and watching us. It's been such a prideful few weeks watching what's going on with many different programs. The Winter Wishes has been just very heartwarming, and it's fun to see. And I know as this week wraps up, they're making some of the final wishes, but just some of those fun things. I think I saw one where they were singing to one of our office staff members, and that was fun to just have them go in and see that. And I know the wishes are from a hug to something very valuable, and it's just nice to see that they're able to do that. And then there's been coverage about Snowed In and just the story about the woman that they're supporting in that, and how courageous she was in sharing her story, but also how our students heard that story and responded to it, and that sort of thing. And then I know there are so many, I've seen videos of school musicals, elementary school music programs, and those are fun, and it's just a fun time. Makes me very proud to be on the school board. And Greg, you know, the story you told tonight, a few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of having, after a gymnastics thing, of having a cup of coffee with Carrie, and exactly that same thing happened. And you know, I'm thinking, this person was approaching us, and I'm thinking, oh, she's coming to talk to me about something on school board. Oh, no, it was a Carrie. She just wanted to thank Carrie for making a difference in her niece's life. And it was like, wow, how cool was that? My daughter and son both had Carrie as well, and it goes back to her student teaching time, but I know 22 years in a school district can really make a difference. And, you know, not only she created this position, and she created the program and developed it to what it is, and she recognizes that she could make the difference in those young people's lives, the most vulnerable, some of the most vulnerable students that we have that come to school on any given day and may have had just a horrible, chaotic morning and they're home, or they may even be suicidal. And Carrie has always known how to respond in those cases. And, you know, we talk about trauma-informed care and how important it is. These are the most vulnerable kids that we have, and it's important to wrap our arms around them both figuratively and literally. And Carrie understood that from the very beginning. And then some of the life lessons that she's taught them with the Ronald McDonald House, and also the lessons they learned. I can never participate in the lunch at Thanksgiving, but I see them out there. I've stopped in a couple times and seen them doing things like getting, you know, decorations and measuring if they need to put something on every table, how many is that, and those sorts of things. And it's just been wonderful to watch. And I've had the opportunity to speak as a school board member and go in for the government class, and they always ask very thoughtful questions, and then they have sometimes some fun questions to ask as well. But in the work I do at Cooley Council on Addictions, I know that Carrie's made a difference in their lives and in supporting them, and what we can do for young people on the prevention side of things is so important. So I just want to recognize her for that work, and again, developing that programming and making it the success that it is. It's probably one of my great disappointments in the district, being on the school board, that we weren't able to keep her here. But as Dr. Mueller said, she found an opportunity. There is an opportunity that I think will stretch her, and she will have an impact, a positive impact on those students as well. And so as we work to find a replacement for her position, I think looking for someone that has all those same qualities will be very important for us. But I know that we will see the good work that she did in other avenues as well. So I just wanted to I don't know if she might be watching, but just say congratulations and best wishes. And I know that as a gymnastics judge, I'll be able to keep in touch, but I can't wait to hear about some of the impact she's made at Western. So, So moving on to just meeting notices, I just would remind you, January 6th, you got an email about an input session that we're having as a district, looking at our mission and vision. It's a Monday night, so hopefully you don't have it filled. We also have a board meeting on the 13th and the 27th in January. State convention is the 22nd to the 24th, and I think Stacy's been collecting information on registrations for those. So if there's nothing else to come to the board, I think we have a closed session, and Anita, if you would read the motion for that, please.
Will do. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby moves to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851E for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, in this case, a possible lease agreement. And I
Okay, is there a
will-
second?
Second.
And then roll call vote.
Brian Wopat,
So it's either a yes or a no. to
Yes.
Go into closed session.
Gary Dunlap.
Yes.
Cheryl Hancock.
Yes.
Barb Wetstein. Rebecca Reber.
Yes.
Me, yes. And
So we will be in closed session in about 3 or 4 minutes as soon as the
Alrighty.
place clears out.
Really freaking